Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, the Buffs are back in the Big 12, and that means we're talking next dominoes to fall. 42, chicken foot, Mexican train. Who's pulling up a seat at the table next? Today on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On at Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and Chris, we are back at it to wrap up the week, and things have advanced as we anticipated since our last conversation when things really began to bubble to the surface regarding Colorado's impending move to the Big 12. Well, now there has been a move made to the Big 12 Conference. The Buffs are back. Come groveling back, you sad sack. Never mind, it's a family program today. We got new old neighbors out here in the West again. Chris, what do you think of Colorado heading for the Big 12 next year?
They're back. I think that's what, Brett Yormark kind of dropped. He actually went Michael Jordan on you. I
love that.
Yeah, it was like the press release with just a little bit of, header on what he was responding to, and then it was just the quote, "They're back." Michael Jordan, famous for faxing everybody, "I'm back." Back in the day when he was
so awesome
coming back into the league, but. Yeah, this as we talked about on our last show, I think we even said when we reconvene, Colorado could be a member of the Big 12, and that is what has happened. I think this happened quickly, although not so quickly, depending on how you want to look at it. I think that this is one of the very few times that this has happened where there is no stickiness or exit fee or. This is going to be a quick pivot for Colorado. Like, hey, it's late July of 2023. We'll see you at Media Days next July, less than a year, and we're just going to slide right into one of these vacant spots that Oklahoma and Texas are going to vacate. So this was long rumored, and Colorado was the low-hanging fruit, I think, in many ways because of their prior relationship and their prior, membership into the Big 12 and the Big 8 conference. There's a lot of same as geography-wise. There's a lot of former, Big 8 rival type things. They have been in this league before. It's well documented. They have not been very good at all in the Pac-12. Their win-loss record is putrid, to be honest. But we can get into that, but this is about more than that. And I think that's why Brett Yormark was like, okay, I got some low-hanging fruit. I'm picking that grapefruit off the tree, man. I'm just going to take it. I'm going to get my little I'm going to slice it up, pour a little sugar on it, be really healthy on this day, and I'm taking the low-hanging fruit. And now let's see what happens, because now this was always the intriguing part. Now what? And here we are.
Yeah, we'll get to some of those subsequent dominoes to fall coming up here in just a moment. And sugar on the grapefruit, huh? I was raised to be a salt man on the grapefruit, but there's more than one way to skin a grapefruit, I guess.
Just a titch, just a little bit, just to kind of kill the bitterness of it.
Chris, there's so many opinions out there given about this subject for a couple of years now, and certainly it's been happening over the last 24 hours that miss all boats. So to even process all those is a waste of time. But there's so many you're looking at and you're thinking, that's not what this has to do with. I don't know why you're wasting so much breath on Twitter or whatever, or X. But that's not what this has to do with. There's so much of that going on. It blows me away. I won't even try to tackle all of it. But let's just get to one aspect of the Colorado edition. You mentioned their record. You mentioned their lack of competitive success in the Pac-12, which is no different than it was for the most part in the Big 12, at least the latter stages of their inclusion in the Big 12 conference. And, you see tweets like, why are the Big 12 and the Pac-12 fighting over the worst program in either conference? you couldn't miss the bigger point more so if you tried, because, Chris, this truly is just a domino, and low-hanging fruit, or whatever way you want to describe it, I think is also appropriate. It's not, in my opinion, tell me if you disagree, it's not about the Colorado get. It's not if like Colorado is just singularly available that every conference in America is lining up to get Colorado, but it's about what it does to the remainder of the Pac-12 conference. I mean, I'm glad to have Colorado. Fine. They're a Power 5 addition, and you've got some familiarity. Fine. I really don't care one way or another about the Buffaloes. Welcome back, and you forever leaving, I guess is what I'd say. But I don't think that it has anything to do with the logo on the side of the helmet necessarily. It has to do with the further dissolution of the Pac-12 conference and more Power 5 options then becoming available to the Big 12. And I've said this term so many times, I began to think, well, maybe it's not, because nothing ever happened. The writing has been on the wall for years, Chris. And people want to point at George Kalishnikov. People want to point at all this stuff happening right now and say, boy, you really screwed it up. No, he didn't. Larry Scott screwed it up. You screwed it up, Pac-12 leadership, in 2011. This pooch has been screwed for over a decade, Chris. They shot every bullet in the gun, expanded, conference championship game, television network, and your member institutions were still making less than the Big 12 conference. And that was the truth a decade ago. So when you think about USC, in comparable financial company to K-State and Texas Tech, they're not going to tolerate that for very long. When they're trailing Oklahoma and Texas and other blue bloods by like $15-20 million, and most of it has to do with third-tier rights, which is not weeds we'll get into. But anyway, that was not going to be tolerable. And that was set in motion so long before George Kalishnikov ever showed up on the scene. And it has nothing now at this point of saying, boy, Colorado's so appealing. Let's go get Colorado. No, it has to do with survival of the fittest. And I've said this before on this show, Chris. At the end of the day, if I could boil it down to one thing, care factor has helped the Big 12 survive. Your fan bases, your support bases care more across a general kind of map than those in the Pac-12 do. And I still think that's generally the reason why we're here today, is because you turn the turnstile at the stadium, you show up and you put butts in seats, and eyeballs watch these teams on television more than they do Arizona, Oregon State, even Colorado to a degree. And I think all of that has not changed, Chris, for about a decade now. So I want to pile on Kalishnikov too. It's fun. But the root of this issue, I don't think, was created in any recent history. It was actually created 12 or 13 years ago. Where am I right or where am I wrong in your opinion?
Yeah, Larry Scott sent this conference down a path where I think he thought they were in really good shape. I think there's quotes and documentation that suggests that they were puffy chested and feeling really good about things. And obviously recently George Kliavkoff, because think about it, Yormark and Kliavkoff basically come into the commissioner space, and neither one of them has really ample or any college athletic experience whatsoever. They were both outside, the box hires. Kliavkoff kind of a more of a Vegas sports book, just kind of guy. And then obviously we know what Yormark was. One of them has worked incredibly well. One of them has just been a miserable failure. I will say this. Shockingly, I will defend Larry Scott and Kliavkoff a little bit, just because I think that some ownership belongs on the leadership of the Pac-12 conference.
100%. You're right.
Whose buffoonery is it that continues to send out these statements from the conference? I mean, because Kliavkoff works for all the school presidents or whatever leadership body that they have in charge of, and they're the ones that said, we don't want to expand, or we're certainly not taking Oklahoma and Texas, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech.
Yep.
We don't. They can't even decide on this very day if they want to expand right now. And meanwhile, the ship is sinking. I mean,
it's not sailing; it's sinking.
Yeah, I mean, think about this. It is mind-boggling to me. Absolutely blows my mind that as we sit here right now, Colorado just secured the bag. They're going to get close to $50 million. With the media rights deal and everything else that comes with the conference, conference tournaments, NCAA tournament share, college football playoff money, and all that stuff. It gets to about 45, 50 million, I think is what they were distributing. And yet Oregon, one of the biggest brands in the sport, doesn't know where their next dollar is coming from next year. That couldn't be any more, stark. And it's just wild to me. But, I don't know. We'll get into kind of what's next. But I think that, the Pac-12 is their infighting or their inability to agree on what is best for the league. And then you've got academia versus athletic.
Yeah.
You've got old school versus some folks trying to be new school. There's a lot of, and then all these states kind of have these, you got Oregon State, Washington State, Arizona
right.
State. And so, there's some legislature and state politics that kind of go along with some of that. So,
there's like old money, new money. There's the academic delusion, which is their strongest pitfall, I guess, or their most consistent pitfall for the league. Chris, you are absolutely right. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make about their current commissioner. And I guess I should, even though I like making fun of Larry Scott, let's go hire an international women's tennis director to run the league. That's a great idea. They're working for someone or someone's. Mm-hmm. And who is it? These idiots that have been there all along. Now, again, I don't think terrific leadership could have changed how much Cal fans care about football.
No.
Across the Pac-12 landscape, they care less, and this is part of the consequence for that being the case. And when you care less, you may not care now that this is a consequence. So I don't even know if it's on their radar. Does Berkeley know they have an athletics department that's set to make less money next year? I don't know. But this lies at the feet of so many across Pac-12 country that are not conference commissioners and that have been there for eons and allowed it to get to this. And this is why all those things I was describing just a moment ago, that's why, Chris, whenever the Big 12 began to shake again with OU and UT leaving, and everybody was so quick to say, please, Pac-12, please, Pac-12. I was saying at that time, no, hell no. What would you want to do with a sinking ship? And the Pac-12 had just hired a new commissioner then, and I thought, okay, what's his route here to fix what is a problem? It's not like, just a conference lost a couple of blue bloods. They were screwed already. So how do you fix it? Do you either expand and enlarge the belt, or do you tighten the belt? I didn't know which way he was going to try to go, but I didn't want Texas Tech to be involved with the Pac-12 in any way, shape, or form. I'm glad that some of those wishes came true. And now seemingly, because this does relate to, obviously, our selfish interests, Texas Tech, because of what has happened with the Big 12 Conference, is in a better position now than they would have been if that path would have been available to them and Oklahoma State and Kansas and whoever I guess you thought might have been headed west after Longhorns and Sooners headed east. But let's get to the remainder of the dominoes, Chris, because this is when you really thought, okay, the timeline could tick up after that one steps out there, right? After just that one steps through the door, who's going to be next? We touched on this a little bit on our last show because there were some reports about surprise defectors outside of those four corner schools who have been discussed so much. Is it an Oregon? Is it a Washington? What's your feel on the next domino to fall? First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And in this day and age, every new hire can feel like a huge gamble. And when we're talking about your business or livelihood, that's not ideal. But LinkedIn Jobs is here to help by helping you find the best qualified candidates available fast and for free, all on one easy to use and secure platform. Simple but specific targeting tools allow you to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to consider. They go beyond just resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates faster than anyone else. So go to linkedinjobs.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedinjobs.com/lockedoncollege today to identify the most qualified candidates and connect with them fast and for free. Just like a bad hire could sink your ship, the right hire could take your business to new heights this year. And it's no coincidence that small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. It's so easy. Even a podcast host could do it. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today with LinkedIn Jobs. Terms and conditions apply. What's your feel on the next domino to fall?
There's a process that comes with this. It's fairly lengthy. There's a lot of I think things to work through. I think it's about to get sped up because again, you have politics, you have academia versus then you've got budget and financial, and you've got fit, and there's a lot of different dynamics on any kind of campus, and there's want. I think that Washington State right now could raise their hand and go, hey, guys, we will take a bid to the Big 12 right now. And I just don't think that's a phone call that Brett Yormark would really answer and go, man, we appreciate it, but we're good. So with all that being said, I think that maybe I don't know if there's necessarily a race to be number 14 here or 15 or 16 because there's so many dynamics here. But I do think you're about to, this is about to be fairly interesting in the coming days or week to 2 weeks or month, just because I just don't envision a scenario where the Big 12 operates as a 13-member conference next year. Maybe they can figure out scheduling and make that work. I don't think that that's really what their intention is. I think they would like to add a 14th member. Now, do I think it so much so that if they get, a bunch of stiff arms from everybody else in the Pac-12 that they would go, okay, UConn, come on down. I don't envision that. I think that, that they could figure out a way to make a 13-team league if they just had to. Now, as far as who's next, Arizona is going to get the most pub. They had been engaged. I think that people will tell you that had semi kind of stopped. I think they have maintained, their president has absolutely maintained repeatedly, we are not going to really do anything until we are presented with a Pac-12 media rights deal. Now, what happens if you are never presented with the deal? Is there because that's kind of where we're at, right? I don't. There's just been deadline after deadline, and now you have less to offer up a media company.
They're like in the Pac-12 HQ, and they're saying, "Hey, if we give them something crappy, they may bolt." And then somebody says, "What if we give them nothing at all?"
Trapped. This is what you're dealing with. I believe the surprise team or the team that has, I think, had their interest peaked, I think is Oregon. I do. I think it's Oregon. I think that's semi well documented right now that they've started to kind of get real antsy and started to get, a little more open-minded about it. I do think they have an Oregon State problem of sorts. I think that, I don't know, because here's the thing. If Washington and Oregon would have gone to the Big Ten, I for all that money, I just don't think that anybody could have said anything or really would have said much. And you may have been frustrated if you're in that state or politically or otherwise, but you would have been like, yeah, damn, man, but we would have done the same thing. And so at some level, this is very similar because you're talking survival versus, what is Oregon going to do? Be an independent? And BYU, they were struggling, with that existence for years. And finally, they kind of liked it, but they're like, okay, as soon as we get an offer to join a league, we're out. Like, well, this is what we want to do. We don't have to screw with scheduling anymore. We got guaranteed money coming in. We don't have to play on all these crazy nights anymore that ESPN was throwing us on. So anyway, I just I don't. But I think I don't think Arizona State's really involved, if I'm being honest right now. That could change, but I don't think Arizona State's involved. Arizona's a school to watch. I think, and I'm not certain that the Big 12 is just super excited about Arizona State. So I think that may be a two-way street there.
Do you have any feel for that deal? Like, I'm shocked that the Sun Devils have had their nose turned up so consistently.
Yeah, I don't pretend to know the minutia of the why. Yeah. I just know that, and maybe it's because the Big 12 kind of is not super interested. I would say this: if Arizona State called up today and said, hey, man, we'd like to get going, I think the Big 12 would absolutely talk to them. Don't misunderstand. I just think that there is a pecking order. I think Arizona is maybe highest on it. I think Oregon and Washington are right there on it. I think the fascinating question is where does UConn or the Gonzaga folks fit on that? Because to me, you're going to wait out any sort of Pac-12 school. I mean, UConn may rank higher than the Washington States and the Oregon States of the world, or the Cals and the Stanfords. Okay. But I don't believe that UConn is on a wish list higher than Arizona, Oregon, Washington, and Utah is a bit of a wild card too.
What if I threw you an ACC candidate also? I mean, when we're talking about Power 5 inclusion, are you rushing if you think there's a possibility there to add a UConn?
And they're talking about expansion as well.
Of course.
The ACC is. I don't – where Brett Yormark won – in one of many ways, but where he won was they got ESPN mainly to say we'll give everybody a full share. I think Fox is going to come along for the ride there. I don't know if it's in that contract.
I saw Brett McMurphy say actually he made it seem like Fox is in that same category.
Yeah, okay.
So there'd been talk about some difference, but he made it sound like both of those guys are like, hey, Power 5 edition, here's the full share.
Because I mean, Central Florida, Houston, BYU, they're not getting that. They're not getting a full share for another 2 years, I think. You're gradually going to get into this space. The ACC doesn't have it. I don't think in there any kind of language there. I don't think that, and this is why the Big Ten really couldn't or didn't want to include Washington and Oregon, just because the money's not there. Plus, I think there's some chatter that USC's like, hey man, we'll show up, but we don't want you including any of these other folks. We want the West Coast to ourselves.
Yes.
So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But Yormark basically has some money burning a hole in his pocket. And it's like, please take it if you're Pac-12 schools. And I think I've got essentially 3 spots left to offer, at a full share, which is, again, does somebody get antsy and go, guys, man, I hear you. I've been willing to listen. I'm out. I mean, I'm out, and then you start making. I don't know what the last 24 or 48 hours have been like from the Big 12 conference.
Man, I've got a couple of dreams here that take me in different directions, but one dream has been to get Arizona back in the league so that every time we play them, they'll put a graphic on the screen that says Tech leads that series like 25-4 or whatever it is. We don't have many Power 5 series that we just thrash them historically. I noticed that a few years ago in the non-conference matchup when I was pulling up some data on the history and thought, wow, we used to kick out of Arizona in the border conference. Let's get them back in the league so we can remind everybody about that. That's one dream. But also, Chris, my Manifest Destiny Conference dream. We are just an Oregon away from Manifest Destiny Conference becoming a real thing. I'm talking coast to coast, baby. And I've been beating that drum for many, many years now. Never thought it was feasible, practical, or even possible. But I didn't know what 2023 was going to bring. We're just one Oregon edition away from Manifest Destiny Conference. And that is a trademark name, but I'll sell it to Brett Yormark for a fair price. Okay, we are switching gears as we wrap up the show. Wrap up the week. Coming up next with a question from you. We'll get to the YouTube comments and take a look into the crystal ball, talking the future of Jones Stadium. Next on Locked On Texas Tech. First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And if you want a championship team, you need championship parts that fit together just right. And it's no different with your vehicle. Every part's got to fit exactly right. And that's where eBay Motors comes in. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits exactly right the first time, every time. Just head on over to ebaymotors.com, add your ride info to the My Garage portal, and look for the green check to know the part is going to be an exact fit or you're getting your money back. No risk. In sports, life, or anything in between, confidence is going to be the name of the game, and that's exactly what you're going to have when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, and with the right parts guaranteed, you're going to be back in the game and on the road in no time. So get the right parts, the right fit, and at the right prices on ebaymotors.com now. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Yes, welcome back once again to Locked On Texas Tech, wrapping up the week with voices from the YouTube comments. With Chris, I'm Casey, stepping away from realignment and back to the LBK, Chris, as we're heading over to Jones Stadium, which is going to be looking a little bit different in 2023, way different in 2024. And beyond that, well, that's what we're here to talk about, courtesy of this question from our good buddy at Yes Kusi MMIJ. If that's a curse word in a different language, I do apologize to all the Czechoslovakians in the audience. The question is this, however: after the South End Zone project is completed, how much additional capacity could be added to Jones Stadium, and where could additional seating be added? I look forward to hosting 70,000 fans someday, but I don't know if it's feasible within the current footprint. That's the question, Chris. Tech is sitting around 61,000, I guess, capacity right now. You're losing a little, I think, with the South End Zone project when that's completed, because we're going to have some suite space or loge space or whatever you call it there at that time. But what do you see in the future for the Jones? Are we about maxed out, or a little more room to stretch your legs?
Yeah, and I hate to get asked a question and kind of give you a bit of an I don't know, but I think you're right, Cowan. I think that if anything, it's really could end up being a little bit less than what full capacity has been, maybe slightly more, but it won't. It's going to be about 60,000, I think, and I could be off by 500 or 1,000 seats. And I think that the main question that is being asked here is like, okay, is there a place in this stadium now, once you finish this project, where you can, add another, seating section to get some more folks in there? And I think that your stadium will be kind of I'm sure you could come up with something if just you felt like you just had to, or that was some sort of criteria or whatever. But I think that you'll be just more concerned about trying to fill up the 60,000 ish that you will have.
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be cause for much larger of a number at any point in the near future. I'm not even sure what it would have to look like, though, because again, you may be, as the question alludes to, a little locked into the footprint. I do think at some point in time, I guess now I'm hoping that they'll go ahead and do away with the turf double T in the north end zone and just throw some seats in there. But that may be like, I don't even know, 2,500 or something. It's not like it's a huge space. But ever since they took out the old double T and that packed some sentimentality with it and then added a turf double T, for what reason, I have no freaking clue. But either way, that means absolutely nothing to me anymore. So maybe there's a space for a few more seats to be added there. But I think you're pretty well locked in probably to the setup that you got for a considerable period of time. And of course, construction will be the scene there on the South End Zone as we head into 2023. But we've got about, I think, 36 days to football. Add another week for the first home game, because that's to the opener there in Wyoming. But yeah, man, that clock is ticking. And you check it on that construction cam every once in a while on YouTube, and you're thinking, okay, what day are we kicking things off here? But I'm sure they've got a great plan, as do we for next week for Locked On Texas Tech. So I hope you'll join us once again. Fall camp is included in next week's conversation. Actual assembling of football interest. It's an exciting time to be alive in West Texas, and we'll be back to discuss it from top to bottom, inside and out, next week on Locked On Texas Tech. So I hope you'll join us then. Enjoyed it once again, as always, today and throughout the week, Chris. Looking forward to doing it again next week, man. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Have a good weekend and keep your head on a swivel this weekend. You start seeing some realignment rumors. Just make sure that those accounts are verified and you're retweeting the right one, and you know who to believe and who not to believe. But yeah,
that's
keep your head on
advice.
the swivel.
That's great advice, because there's so many spitting out so many things.
Yes.
And a few of them you may check the handle and think, I'm not so sure if they've got the most accurate information. Wise words from a wise man. That's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. You're wise for joining us. And let's express that wisdom again together next week by making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And we'll see you then for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.